anime openings are only spoilery if you don't know what's happening.
We all know.
Or if you do know what's going
We
to
all
happen.
know that in episode 1, when we see Dad character in the intro start fading away, even if you haven't watched the anime before, you know Dad character is going to die.
That's not that much of a spoiler.
I mean, that's true, but if that is something that you care about. Hello and welcome to Add It to the List, the show where two white guys binge watch the first season of an anime and then talk about whether or not it should go on your watch list. My name is Jack, and with me as always is Forrest.
Hello.
And beware spoilers for this week's episode, Vinland Saga. So, going into it, Forrest, what did you know about Vinland Saga?
I mean, initially I didn't know anything about the series when I first watched it, but I guess we should say that for me, I've seen this show and Jack hasn't seen this show yet. So when I first watched it, it was 100% blind. And so this was a very interesting experience just, because I've engaged with the series a lot more since I initially watched it. And I definitely had a lot more opinions, I guess, this time around. But yeah, I mean, since then I've learned a lot about its origin and whatnot. And I mean, we can discuss that later if we would like to. But what about you, Jack?
I guess before I answer that, for the benefit of anybody listening, what do you mean by engage with the series? How much is there to engage with,
Oh,
Forrest?
I mean, there's a manga, and I've read everything that is published in the West in for that. But I mean, like the manga, I think just makes you engage with the story significantly more, and it made me realize a lot about my opinions on just the beginning of the story and stuff like that.
Cool beans. Similarly, I had about a year and a half ago when season 1 first came out, I had started watching the first couple of episodes with a buddy of mine, and then I got tired of going over to his house to watch anime, so I decided to just do it at my house, and then I stopped watching because that was the show that I was watching with him. But even before that, I had similarly read up through the end of what's covered in season 1 in your manga. So yeah, this is a little interesting because this is the first time that we're playing around with a show that has a manga that we have both consumed. It's probably not going to happen often, especially considering how I honestly don't read that much manga. But it's the case in this one. Yeah. In general, keeping it spoiler free, I really liked this season. I think it was a very cool adaptation. I think it was very truthful to the manga in a lot of ways, and I think because the manga is good, that just means that the anime was good. The characters are very fun, the action's very awesome, and it's in general well paced. I do have some issues, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in a similar boat. I think it is a really good adaptation. But yeah, I mean, should we get into kind of the early summary, or do you want to go over any of the background?
We can go into it. So, Vinland Saga. Oh, I should have said up top. Also, in addition to beware of spoilers, beware of trigger warnings for some pretty unflinching violence. And in the anime, some brief allusions to sexual violence as well. The manga is a little bit more forthcoming with the sexual violence, but to its credit, even the manga is pretty light on it. I think there's a total of 3 or 4 panels wherein it's overt, and even then, it's not like you're watching it. But it's still worth thinking about going into it. Vinland Saga is about Vikings. At its core, that's pretty much all that you need to know moving into it. We open in episode 1 on a not scenic because it's in the middle of winter, but in a pretty like peaceful village in Iceland. Greenland?
It's Iceland, I
Iceland?
think.
Okay. I thought I did that right, but then I was just second guessing myself enough. A pretty peaceful village in Iceland. A pretty standard family, a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife. Um, the dad's this big figure in the village. His name is Thors. He's a really rad dude. Everybody loves him. He's a weirdo. He's like not necessarily as engaged with the Viking sensibilities of like war and death and like all of that. And as a modern watcher, you're just like, oh, what a good dude. We get about an episode into that life when these really badass Vikings roll up, going, hey, yo, where's Thor's? We learn that they are the Jomsviking. Um, they're badass Vikings. That's more or less all that there is to it. Turns out Thor's used to be a leader in their war band until he faked his own death to run away with his wife and, at the time, baby daughter.
Well, I think we should also, or did you mention that it starts like the first scene is a battle with Thor's?
Honestly, I forgot when that happened, so
Yeah, it's like the opening scene of the anime is like him in the middle of a naval battle, and it's the battle that he leaves the Yom Vikings on, like
okay.
during. So
Then we knew that from the get-go. I thought that happened later.
I'm pretty certain that's like
I
the
mean,
opening scene, and
thinking
then it
about it,
cuts back
thinking
to
about it, you're very right. I was just conflating that scene with a later scene.
yeah.
But so we know from the get-go that Thor's is a badass. But we really start the story with him just stone cold chilling in this village. The Yomes Viking shows up, going, "Hey, Thor's, we're going to war. We found out that you're alive. Normally we kill deserters, but we want you back enough because you're a good enough warrior that the king's willing to pardon you. So take anybody from this village that you think's up to fighting stuff, bring them with you. We're going to war, baby." So Thor's son, Thorfinn, who is the main character of this story, is about 4 at this point. And he, being a young Viking lad, is very enthralled with the concepts of like, oh my god, my dad's super cool. My dad's this awesome warrior. Why has he been hiding this? We're going to war. I'm going to go kill people. Thor's ain't about it.
I mean, that's like everyone, right? I mean, like everyone in the village kind of has that ideology because I mean, I think the implication is they are all, immigrants in a way. Just, or I mean, not even immigrants, just like people who wanted to get away from mainland, you know. So most of them, when they learn that they're going to war, they're like, "Yes, we get to kill people."
Yeah, like they are. The show makes no like allusions or does not try to hide the fact that like, yeah, these people like they're knee deep in the Viking culture. They're here for that ideology, that valor, that honor, that afterlife of dying on the battlefield. But since they are in a peaceful, isolated village, the young men and even the old men haven't done the whole war thing in a while, so they're very taken aback and very much buying into like that romanticized idea of it that they've been taught by their culture and their stories and all of that. Thor's takes a group of guys, does not take his 4-year-old son because he is a good dad, and sets off. But Thor's has this big plan going on with actual factual Leif Erikson.
Yeah, Leaf is a good character. I like him a lot.
He's a great character, but also Leif Erikson's a character.
I mean, but also pretty much every character in this is inspired by a real person. I mean, like even later characters are. So it's not just Thorfinn. I mean, we'll touch on. I feel like after this, during we'll talk about Thorfinn as a person, but
And that's fair. I just very much found Leif Erikson being the most like pop culture, like well known name of the bunch to be very much like a what? And
yeah.
I felt that way when he's introduced in the manga as well, just like a what? Um,
With his very anime mustache.
oh, I love it.
It reminds me of like Miyazaki movies.
Yeah, now that you say that, I see that pretty. Yeah. That's pretty on the nose, or on the lip in this case. But yeah, so he hatches this plan with Leif Erikson to go and restock on this Midway Point island and then trick all of the boys into going back to the village. Because at this point, Thors is done with it. He knows what war is. He's not here for this. He doesn't want to expose these, 16-year-olds, maybe, if they're lucky to be that old, to the realities of this. But before he can get there, two things happen. One, Thorfinn smuggled his way onto the boat. Haha. We get a really weird peeing scene with him. Yeah. It's a comedy moment that, like, looking back on it, there's a lot of moments where we watch people pee in this show.
Yeah,
There's at least
pretty much,
four.
Pretty much every time that Askeladd has an emotional scene, it's when he's peeing.
We don't know who Askeladd is at this point, but I hate the fact you're right.
He's like, oh, yeah, I got to go off and do something. And then, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to have a deep conversation.
Yeah, just a couple of dudes pissing in the snow and talking talks, man. Thorfinn snuck aboard. We cut to Askeladd, actually, who is this Viking guy. He has a crew of 100, maybe 200 at this point of guys, and they're pretty good. Like, we haven't seen them do anything really impressive at this point, but it's all staged and framed in a way that's like, oh, this dude's pretty strong. We cut to him being hired by the very same person who brought Thors out of retirement to kill Thors. So immediately you get a very good image of this is going to be, in addition to a violent show, an intrigue political show. It really kicks off later on in that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We get a really cool scene where Askeladd's negotiating the price. There's a lot of really cool subtle moments that get paid off in a really cool way. So we then go back to Thors and the crew, and they get got in an ambush. And Thors basically goes, oh, these guys will kill all of these kids. And I can't fight these guys while I am trying to protect these kids.
I mean, he fights most of them.
Yeah.
Which is super epic.
There's a very cool fight scene where he's like, all right, you guys stay here.
And then he leaps I don't know, 100 feet, I swear to God. He just jumps from one boat to another. And he's seen doing this in the initial scene of the show. He just leaps from ship to ship like it's fucking nothing. And he's dope.
He's very dope. He leaps onto one of Askeladd's 2 warships and just goes to town on all of the guys in there with just his hands. These guys are all decked out. They've got their gear. They're swinging to kill. And he's just breaking arms, punching noses, judo flipping people into the water. He's going in, but he's going in non-lethally because he's a good boy. And then he has a moment of going, okay, they're getting too close to the rest of them. I can't fight the way I'd need to fight to keep them safe if they were basically within the splash zone. So he challenges Askeladd to a duel. He scans the field and he's like, oh, that guy's definitely the leader. So he challenges Askeladd to a duel. And Askeladd's like, all right, yeah, sure, I'll humor you. We're introduced in a very short amount of time to the idea that Askeladd is very good at reading people and planning. So they have, honestly, a very intense duel. It's not that long as terms of action goes. But there's a lot of back and forth internal dialogue, okay, he's doing this, this, and this, which means he wants me to do this, so I've got to do this. It's a very strategic, very intensely intellectual way of thinking about the fights, and not like in a standard anime sense where it's like, I need to go all out. I need to go to a level beyond Super Saiyan, a Super Saiyan 2, if you will, right? Like, it's not that. It's like actually like, okay, cool. He's swinging high and he's favoring his right side, so I need to go low to the right, or I need to keep my guard to the left, like that sort of thing.
It's how fights should be, in my opinion. Like it's just a well thought out conflict, that doesn't just rely on brute strength.
Which, to be fair, these two are very strong lads. But yeah, like it is very much they're making decisive, well thought out decisions in the fight. Well, Thor's gets the better of Askeladd. And he's like, okay, cool. I've won. Surrender. And Askeladd basically goes, no. And then one of his guys takes Thorfinn hostage. And in that time, while Thor's is distracted, Askeladd just has him shot by a bunch of arrows. He Boromir's real hard, and he's just standing there looking like a porcupine.
Oh, and then for anyone who likes One Piece, he also does a Whitebeard where he just kind of dies standing up.
Fair enough. But before that happens, he's just like death staring Askeladd and basically goes, yeah, there's still enough in me to get you. And yeah, the rest of your guys will survive, but you'll be dead. Honor our duel and let them go. And to his credit, Askeladd's like, all right, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Askeladd, as we will discuss, is a very complex character, and I think that scene is meant to kind of, drive this stake into the center of, like, Viking warrior ideology, because Askeladd didn't, remain true to the duel. He didn't, do everything as a Viking should, because they care so much about, a duel that isn't cheap, a duel that is like just meant to send you to Valhalla, basically. And Askeladd's just like, I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever I want because I'm a pirate. I mean, like, they do specifically call them pirates. Like, they are Vikings, but the whole ideology thing is very central to the story.
Yeah, the show doesn't really refer to them as Vikings because, I mean, realistically, it makes sense because within their own culture, it's not like Vikings would have a specific meaning for the Danes, right? Like, it's just like, yeah, I am a pirate who is Danish, and so to the rest of the world, they just call me a Viking, right? So it makes sense. But, like, yeah, so we cut to the teenagers and Leif Erikson. Again, actual factual Leif Erikson rowing away. Well, back on Askeladd's two ships with all of his Askelads, they're towing Thor's warship because they're like, well, this is ours now. You guys can fit in the other ship that you have. That's mine. We cut back to the guys going, wow, that was pretty cool. And that was like the easiest money we've ever made.
And they were also like, or Askeladd asks, how many people died? And then the guy's like, no one died. And they're just like so shocked by the fact that he didn't kill anyone. But that's also a very central aspect of the story. Like what a warrior truly is. Which is a very important moment with Thor's there during that fight because, he doesn't carry a sword because he specifically has a line where he's like, a true warrior doesn't need a sword. And that's kind of just, honestly, the central theme of almost the entire story, even beyond this arc.
Yeah, to that moment, what Forrest is referring to is back in the village when everyone's like getting super excited to go to war. 4-year-old Thorfinn starts rooting around his dad's stuff, going like, okay, cool. If I'm going to come along, I need a weapon. And he finds these 2 short swords / daggers. They kind of get called both interchangeably. Realistically, they're the length of daggers, but they get called short swords a couple of times. And Thorfinn's holding it with this reverence. And from behind him, Thor's just palms it. Yeah. Like, full on grabs the sharp of it and just takes it away from him. And he's like, why do you want a sword? And Thorfinn, being 4, just goes, I don't know, to to kill my enemies. And Thor has this very powerful moment where he's looking at him. He's not angry. He's not upset. He looks a little sad to me, but that's sort of up to debate. And he just goes, a sword is a tool for killing your enemies. Tell me, who are your enemies? And it's a very powerful moment. Thorfinn gives like a 4-year-old answer, like, I don't know the English. And Thor goes, nobody has any enemies.
Yeah, it's a really good moment.
Yeah, it's a very good moment. But anyway, Askeladd's towing the ship away, and someone's like, oh, hey, there's someone on that ship. Turns out Thorfinn stowed away on his dad's ship, and little 4-year-olds full of rage going, I'ma kill you. He's just absolutely given Askeladd the business. If looks could kill, this would be a much shorter anime.
And everyone on Askeladd's ship are like, oh my god, look at his eyes. He's just a child. And then you're just like, well, you did just murder his father right in front of him. I don't know what you would expect. And then they're just kind of like, okay, whatever. I guess he's just going to die eventually anyway, so we'll just leave him there.
Yeah.
They just like have zero. I mean, like, that also is a big aspect of the Viking ideology. Like, they're just kind of like so just desensitized. They're just like, oh yeah, we just killed this kid's father, but like that's just how it is. So I mean, like,
Yeah,
we
what's
don't
he up
care if
about?
he's suffering because he's just gonna die anyway. You know, they're just so disconnected from the ideology that Thor's was trying to teach to Thorfinn. You know.
Yeah. They pull off to this very beautifully animated, very beautifully drawn, very idyllic village. It's like late harvest, like late summer, early harvest. It's very beautiful. And yeah, they take a village. They're like, oh, we're gonna spend a couple of months here recuperating, getting stuff going. Full disclosure, this isn't in the manga. This is how the anime fills you in on a couple of years of Thorfinn's life that the manga just sort of introduces the concept and then breezes past. But you get Thorfinn going up and trying to challenge Askeladd to a duel with this big old sword, like an actual full-length sword. And Askeladd's like, all right, I got time to beat up a child. And he beats up that child. Yeah, and then he's like, yeah, dude, don't let your sword swing you around. Okay, now go die in the woods. And over the course of while Askeladd's guys are there, we get like training montages of like Thorfinn learning how to like hunt for himself and being fast enough to catch rabbits and figuring out that he's not large enough to use a sword, so he starts really going in on his father's daggers, and we go on, and we have like a pretty good training montage interlaced with like just some pretty real, like, this is a hungry kid in the woods moment.
Yeah, I guess I was also gonna say like this is a minor detail, but he did only have one dagger initially because his father only had the one.
I also thought that his father only had the one, but then later on when he has 2 daggers, they both have the like double arrow, like,
Well,
crafter's mark.
and I'm confused about that because, yeah, that's true, but he gets that second dagger the first time he kills someone, and it already has that mark on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
Maybe
that
that's
mark.
just a cultural thing
Yeah, I
that
don't
we
know if
don't
that
know
mark
about.
is like specifically indicative of something, or my. I mean, like, I can't remember if you specifically see it when he first gets that second dagger, but like he also could have just carved it in there, you know.
Fair.
Anyway, I mean, like, it's a very minor detail.
Yeah. The long and the short of it is he comes back with a dagger, and Askeladd's like, oh, that's better. Okay, cool. Now go off and die again. Right? Like, he still doesn't kill him. He still kicks his ass because he's 4.
Yeah.
And Askeladd, we find out later, is like, at this point, like 40? Dude must be on a juice cleanse. He doesn't look a day over anime 25. Yeah. And so they kind of go on, and Thorfinn basically like latches on to them because what he wants is to kill Askeladd in an honorable duel. Because he didn't get what Thor's was saying. But what he knew, in the way that only a child can be convinced of something that is wrong, He said, my dad was an honorable warrior. If they fought honorably, he would have won. He did win when they were fighting honorably. I cannot avenge him if I do not defeat Askeladd in an honorable duel. And I will kill him in an honorable duel. And Askeladd's basically like, yeah, dude, if you I'm not going to spend the time to kill you. Like, if you follow along, you can follow along. After a certain point, we get a montage of 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old Thorfinn just being alongside the dudes in battle. We watch him get his first kill.
That's an interesting thing because I believe seeing his first kill is not in the manga.
Nope, none of this is in the manga.
Yeah.
From the time that they touch down in this second village until a point later on that we're coming up to quickly, none of this is in the manga. Yeah, we watch him doing all of that, and we get to a point where basically Askeladd has a standing arrangement with him, hey, you do some useful stuff on the battlefield for me, I'll let you challenge me to a duel. But I will decide when you've done enough to get a duel. So Thorfinn's basically part of the crew, whilst very, very specifically not considering himself part of the crew. And for what it's worth, he doesn't eat with them. He sleeps as far away from them as he can. He fights with them. He fights their enemies. He raids the villages that they raid. The next scene that's in the manga, and that's shortly after the whole, hey, if you do stuff, I'll give you duels. They need a spy to go into this English village. And they send Thorfinn because he's 12, and that's far less noticeable and scary than a bunch of Danish men with armor and swords.
Well, this part is in the manga, which I thought was interesting because they kind of interlace different parts that aren't in the manga. I think, or did we already get past everything that wasn't in the manga?
At this point, we're done with everything that's anime original. Okay. So he's doing the scouting mission on this English village. This woman finds him, and it's this very sweet little episode where it's just this woman and her daughter taking care of him because he's wounded, and I can't remember why. It's pretty inconsequential. But she's taking care of him. This guard comes up and is like, hey, there's a Danish spy about the age of that kid. And then the woman goes, that's my son John, what are you talking about? And it's a really interesting moment. Because the woman has all of her own motivations for doing it. But Thorfinn, because he can't speak English, is getting ready to just okay, I gotta murder this dude. And then the woman sends him away. And for the first time in a while, Thorfinn has a human being's emotions to things. Because that night, the woman and her daughter are fighting over the fact that she did just definitely harbor what is almost definitely the Danish spy. And Thorfinn looks at her and says in English, run. Then he runs off, shoots a signal flare. Boom. Askeladd and his boys attack. And there's this moment where, as they're starting to assault the village, Thorfinn notices the woman notice him and just be in tears.
Because she watches him kill someone.
Yeah, she does that too. And she's in tears, and she is shocked. And for the first time in a couple of episodes, Thorfinn has a moment of vulnerability. And they're staring at each other, and then people rush by, and then where she was, she's not there anymore.
I mean, he also says, I told you to run. He was you could just see the sorrow in him and the sorrow in her. And he was why? I mean, I guess the implication is he might have said it in English. I don't know. But this time around, he was he yells at her. He's I told you to run. And then she's just kind of gone after that. And he's just what did I do?
And then he stands there being a little emotional for another couple of seconds, and then he just takes this big sigh in that sort of dead in the eye, welp, back to the grind look sets over him again. And this moment, I think, is very powerful in the anime for a very different reason than why it was powerful in the manga. In the manga, it very much felt like a way of showing, like, yeah, it's just another day for Thorfinn. Like, it didn't, he tried to be nice, it didn't work out. He's back to it, like, he's back on his bullshit. In the anime, and I don't know if it was like having it being voiced or maybe the pacing was just different because it was like being presented at like that steady gait of animation, but it really does feel more like this is a turning point. This is his, well, I guess I'm in it. Like, it very much feels like this was like that last bit of like common decency, morality leaving him in the anime. Very well done. He then runs off to join the rest of the assault on the village.
Yeah. I guess it also almost feels like a way to convey like him kind of letting go of his past life in a way. Because, since his mom and his actual sister are just like, I mean, like, not dead to him, but just like there's no way he's going to get back to them anytime soon. So, like, he cares about them, but I feel like this moment is made by the fact that, it's another mom and a young, like, a sister figure, and this is him basically just giving up on that, Like, he felt for them, but then once that's over with, he's like, well, I guess this is just my life now.
Well, back to trying to kill Askeladd. Yeah. And then we cut to a French village. Thorfinn's a little bit older, and he, I don't remember what starts off the French village arc. Or did I say arc? The French village episode.
Well, because there's
I don't remember what the opening scene is.
I mean, they lead up to it. Now my like memory is
Right,
fuzzy
like,
because like I'm pretty sure, don't they have that like snippet that's like a time skip where it talks about how the Danish went to war on England and all that stuff, and then I'm pretty sure the winter rolls around, and the reason Askeladd and Co. go to France is because they need to raid a village. They need to get money somehow. And they're like, okay, well, there's no fighting happening right now. I guess we're just going to go and attack someone in France.
Yeah. So it's worth noting that throughout, it happens a lot more in the manga, but throughout the anime, there's just like these, like, there is no narrator, there is no next time on Dragon Ball Z, but there are just like historical snippets like that put the story in context of the world, of like our real world's history. And like, yeah, it's like, yeah, fighting in England was dying down. They didn't, like, they were gearing up for something. Winter was coming. And so yeah, Askeladd, thank you for reminding me. Askeladd and Bjorn. Bjorn is really the only other member of Askeladd's crew that's worth mentioning. I love Bjorn. Bjorn's not a good dude, but he's an interesting character. He's not plot relevant enough really to talk to about during the plot summary, but when we talk about characters later, I'll stop on Bjorn. They're talking, and he's like, yeah, we need to go home with more loot than we have right now. This has been a bad summer for fighting. So like, yeah, let's go to France. I hear that nobles are fighting over territory. And then from France we can swing back home. And so they do. There's this French nobleman who is using all of his nobleman money to just send wave after wave of people after this very well-defended port city. We watch a couple of assault waves get pushed back. And then Askeladd sends Thorfinn to go be a messenger to go, hey, we can give you 100 strong Danish men and guarantee you that town falls by tomorrow. We'll just take half of the loot. Bjorn has this very good moment where he's like, okay, but like, what if they just don't listen to us? And Askeladd goes like, oh, I mean, that's why I'm sending Thorfinn. Like, worst case scenario is they shoot the messenger and it's just Thorfinn.
Yeah, Askeladd doesn't care about Thorfinn.
Like, Askeladd...
I mean, he does in his own weird way, I guess. He uses Thorfinn.
he definitely uses Thorfinn. We'll get into that. I won't get into it, but
Well, and this is also where the manga starts. Like this is
yes.
the first bit of the story that you'll like read. So it's definitely interesting because this part of the story ultimately is meant to just introduce you to a lot of the conflicts in the story initially. So it's kind of
Spoiler
interest.
warning for the series. The last episode is literally the chapter name of that chapter, which is literally called in the manga End of Prologue. So this entire season 1, that's like this arc is the prologue for the actual point of the story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would equate this to like the golden age arc of like Berserk or something. But like yeah, I mean this moment, like this like little event in France, like really doesn't have much of a impact on the story itself, but it's kind of the first time you see Thorfinn. It's the first time you learn about Thorfinn's want to have duels with Askeladd, and like in the manga, you know, this is the first time you're hearing these things. So it's kind of interesting to just see it when you already know all these things in the anime. But anyway,
Yeah, and so Askeladd sends Thorfinn, and through an interpreter, he's like, "Yeah, if you don't let me signal them that you have taken this deal, they're going to go offer the people in the town this deal. Kill me if you want, I don't care." Because at this point, he really doesn't. And then the guy takes him up on it. And then we get a very fun moment of. So basically, the reason why the French haven't been successful in assaulting the town is that there's one very good wall leading to the town, and the lake that the town is on is like a closed off lake that's only real at like river point access has to get through a waterfall that their ships just haven't been successful doing. Well, the next morning rolls around and the nobleman's getting angry. He's like, "Oh my god, they didn't show up. Let's go kill that kid." And we watch Askeladd burst from the tree coverage, standing on the prow of his ship, that's just being carried by all of his Viking dudes, and they just straight up carried their longboats through the mountains to get there. They go around, they start assaulting the village from the back, which then creates unavailability for them to finally punch through the front like gate. Askeladd's crew make short work of them. They're about to just get got by crossbows, but Askeladd goes, "Hey, if you in the manga, he specifies if you bring me the head of their captain, I will give you your duel." In the anime, he just says, "If you bring me a helmet with a feather in it," which is like a weirder, more arbitrary task. Either way, the guy with the helmet with the feather in it is the captain because that's just what happens. But in the manga, it's very specifically bring me the head of their leader, and in the anime, it's like, I don't know, do this thing. But because he's doing that, the captain's chilling out with all the archers, who are otherwise stopping Askeladd's men from docking. Well, Thorfinn's distraction lets Askeladd's men get onto the beachfront. The French burst in, find that there's no one there to fight, and that everybody's dead, and that the town's been looted. And then there's Askeladd just grinning like a madman with a boat full of booty. This is a very fun scene, and the only reason I'm really spending the time to talk about it is it does show you, like, Askeladd is here for, like, yeah, I made a deal with a Frenchman. I really don't care about my deals with the French. Like, he goes back and forth between, like, honoring people that he thinks are worth it and just lying through his teeth. It's a very fun aspect of him as a character. Like, he's very underhanded, but he has his own sense of duties, and his own sense of morals. Yeah, and then that is really the end of more or less arc one of the anime. But yeah, that's like the end of chapter one in the manga. The manga opens with attacking this French village, and then it jumps back to the childhood in his village.
But I mean, before that, they do have one duel. Like they have one. They go back to a village, and then Thorfinn and Askeladd have a duel, and then that duel is kind of the impetus for like flashing back to Thorfinn's childhood. And I think it works fine in this because then it just kind of like continues on after this. And I mean, there are some important moments with Thorfinn, like character wise. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of where the story jumps off, in my opinion, because it's like up till this point we were just getting introduced to Thorfinn as a person, just kind of getting the background for the story, and then we're after this is just when it just gets really good.
Yeah, there's a reason I think that the manga starts with this point before hopping back to give you the context for who these characters are. It's not bad in the anime. It's paced pretty well. We don't spend too much time with child character, which is good because I hate having to put up with child characters. Yeah, so this is the end of the spoiler light discussions and moments, because realistically, moving forward, stuff takes off at an accelerated rate. And it's going to be hard to talk about any one moment in like the second half, second 2/3 of the first season without talking about everything. So if this seems like something that's your stuff, we only really got to like this is episode 7, give or take one. It's anywhere from like episode 6 to episode 8.
I think this is, yeah, about 8 or 9.
You didn't, like, we haven't spoiled too terribly much. These episodes are worth watching. There are some very cool moments. All of the battles are very well, beautifully animated. So if that's your jam, that's your jam. But so that we can feel confident and comfortable talking spoilers free, to the titular, add it to the list. Forrest, would you add the anime, just the anime, to your list?
Yeah, I definitely would. Like I was saying about like these first 9 or so episodes, they are just kind of like an introductory section of the story, and I do personally feel like it's a little slow. I remember even feeling that on my first watch. Like they're good episodes, but it definitely takes its time in like building up. But that being said, like the writing, the character writing, the animation, all really solid. And just like really intriguing. Like it really gets you to care for its characters. Also the opening, which we haven't talked about. I love the first opening. The second opening's pretty good. I mean, I'll still listen to it in the car sometimes, but I love the first opening, dude. Probably an all-time favorite anime opening. And the endings are also really good. So yes, I would most definitely add it to the list. What about you?
So before I say my thing, I will say I really prefer the second opening. As far as like the actual like piece of music goes. As far as like openings themselves, if you are concerned about spoilers and like having things happen and you're trying to go through it like relatively spoiler free, for the love of all that is holy, skip the intro. The intro is very anime about like, oh hey, you see this nimbus ghostly like transparency over these
because if you
characters.
say it, then they're gonna know. Anime openings are only spoilery if you don't know what's happening,
We all know,
or if you do know what's going
we
to
all
happen.
know that in episode 1, when we see dad character in the intro start fading away, even if you haven't watched the anime before, you know dad character is going to die.
That's not that much of a spoiler.
I mean, that's true, but if that is something that you care about, watch the first intro like on episode 10 or 11, right before they switch over to the second intro. And then don't watch the second episode or intro until episode 24.
I am just a big proponent of anime intros. I always watch them no matter what.
I think they're very cool. I specifically avoid watching them because it's like, okay, cool. I don't know who this character is yet, but I know that they're going to do this, this, and this because they're drawn in this, and this way, and they're wearing red. That's not necessarily true in this intro, but this intro is pretty spoilery. Anyway,
Would you add it to the list or not?
Oh, okay. I mean, I was going to do my own transition, but okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I would. I think the anime is very good by its own merits. If I was telling somebody to watch this, because I do think that child arcs take a little bit of time. I'd watch episode 1, I'd skip episode 2 and I think 3. I would watch episode 1 and then I would skip until the spy mission that we were talking about. Just because this show does do enough flashbacks in that anime style that like anything that you do miss, you can figure it out. They're worth watching if you're like trying to get the full experience. But if you do think that the first like part is slow, you can pretty comfortably skip over it. As a whole, definitely add it to the list. I think it's very good. Yeah, it's solid. I don't really have much else to add to it that you didn't touch on yourself. So now, yeah, hold on to your booties. It's about to get spooky. Not actually, but we are just going to talk. We're going to wrap up real fast talking about the story because a lot happens. Like moving forward, things happen and they happen quickly. So they go back to Askeladd's uncle's place. They do the duel. That war that they were talking about was going to start. Well, that starts. So Askeladd and the crew swing on down to London, where they're putting up a mighty impressive defense. And the reason why is Thorkel, this big, beautiful boy. I love him. I am upset with the inundation of Thor names, because Thorfinn, and Thorkill are all plot important characters. My first read through of the manga, especially, I was very confused for like the first dozen or so. I'm bad with names, so it's a personal challenge. My big, beautiful boy, Thorkel, defected. And so they go, okay, cool. Well, we just need somebody to go talk to him and bring him back over to our side. And he goes, no, you don't get it, dude. I defected because these guys were losing, which means fighting them is bad and boring. And so if I fight with them, I get to fight you guys, which is the better fight.
Yeah, and this whole time he's like talking in Danish. So like the guys around him who are English are like, is he talking in a different language? And meanwhile he's just like insulting them, just being like, these guys are weak. Like if I'm not here, they're just gonna lose.
And that's boring. A brief about Thorkill. Thorkill is one of two archetypes that this show does better than I think any other show. Thorkill is the best depiction of fight horny ever. And I think part of it is because there's no horny aspect to it, right? Like, there's no Hunter x Hunter where it's a weird, creepy pedophile vibe because he's literally getting hard thinking about fighting Gon, right? Like, Thorkel's just like, yeah, we're Vikings, we're warriors. We fight honorably, we fight good fights, and that's what life's about. I'm gonna kill you guys so that y'all can go to Valhalla and we can have this honorable battle along the way. Hopefully one day one of y'all will manage to kill me. I guess, but until then, I'm just going to enjoy it. Like, he's not there for violence either, which a lot of characters in this trope fall into, like where they're just sadist. And it's really awkward because of that. Because he isn't really like, oh man, blood, oh dismember me. He's just like, no, dude, this was a good fight. We haven't landed a blow on each other, but we're like, this is a really good fight, right? Like, it's the skill, it's the swordsmanship, it is the warriors' talents going against each other that he's there for.
Yeah, I mean he also is that he wants to learn what being a true warrior is, and like you learn later that he is related to Thorfinn, which I guess we can cover when we get to that plot point. But like, yeah, I mean, he is just there to fight because that is the only thing that matters. You know, like there's not really another meaning to life for him.
Yeah, which, you know, he is He's the culture, to be sure. We never see him do any of like the more. It's weird to say more morally reprehensible when we are talking about a guy who's killing people. But we never see him even in the manga like engage in like the sexual violence aspect of the plundering. He's never like unduly cruel to people. He never, honestly, he doesn't really give a care about the loot either. Like, it's just he's there for the fight because that's what their culture is.
And he's also so strong that like everyone just respects him. Like there's not even like a way to disrespect him because like in their culture it's like you either fight him or you die or you respect him. There's like no other way around it. And like even if you're mad at him for, betraying you, it's like who cares? He'll still just fuck you.
Yeah. In fact, he would welcome you to try to do something about it because that's part of why he defected.
He's so
We watch him hurling ballista bolts by himself at the boats in the river. That's just a fun moment. Yeah, and so winter's starting to get on its way. King Swain, Siwan, Swain.
Yeah.
So Askeladd and the crew are there for one. Askeladd and the crew are there for one last push on London, to try to get it before King Swain's like, all right, we can't do this year. We got to try again next year. And basically Askeladd goes, hey, Thorfinn, you got your duel if you can take care of Thorkel. And Bjorn's sort of like, all right, really, man? You're just sending that kid to die. And he's like, yeah, but we need Thorkel distracted. And I forget why they need Thorkel distracted, but we need Thorkel distracted. And so Thorfinn hops up. He kills a bunch of English dudes on his way to the rampart that has Thorkel on it. And Thorkel's like, all right, you've got balls, dude. That's warrior spirit. Let's do this. Honorable duel. Yo, English, hold back. Like, this is between me and him. And there's a really cool, again, a very analytical fight. It's very slow at times. Like, the actual, like, swinging and action and, like, violence aspect of the fight are very frenetic. They're very active, like fight scenes should be. But there's, like, like, Thorfinn goes in, does a flurry, it doesn't work, he retreats back, he thinks about what he should do. So there's a bunch of that. Thorfinn is not successful, but he chops off 2 of Thorkel's fingers, and homie's like, just like, oh, that was awesome. Dude, what's your name? You are a warrior worthy of my respect. What's up, homie? At this point, the retreat call is sounded by everybody else, and Thorfinn's like, oh, okay, I gotta go, or else I am being left for dead.
Well, I mean, but even after Thorkel got his 2 fingers chopped off,
he keeps going.
He still just like grabbed Thorfinn's knife with it stuck through his hand, and then just was like swinging Thorfinn on the ground, just like smacking him around, and then Thorfinn's like basically just like phased. He's like not knocked out, but he can't really do anything. And then that's when Thorkel is like, dude, that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thorfinn gets him, like, he's going after tendons. He's doing, like, death by 1,000 cuts type things. And he's like, okay, cool. I got him to, like, crumple down in pain. I'm going to go for his face. What he doesn't expect is that homie who's missing fingers is just going to catch your knife in the thick of his palm. And then, yeah, like, then clamps down with his 3 remaining fingers and goes to town on him. Retreat gets sounded. Thorfinn's like, oh, God, I gotta go. Thorfinn goes, and then Thorkel yells, hey, where are you guys going? Thorfinn, let's do that again. That was super fun.
He like throws his hand up and like blood splurts out of it.
He waves with the hand that's missing.
I think we might have actually gotten that backwards because I'm pretty sure he gets Thorfinn's knife stuck in his hand, and then when Thorfinn gets away from him, he cuts the fingers off. Because he's like hanging.
It's all the same fight. It's like a 3-minute chunk of your life.
But still, like, I don't want to be wrong. Why would I want to be wrong?
Forrest, this is the internet. I've accepted that I will be wrong sooner or later, and it is beyond my ability to stop people from correcting me. But they skedoodle. Yeah. So they get pulled out for the winter. King Swain, I don't honestly remember how to pronounce it.
I think it is just Swain.
I think it's Swain too, but it makes me think of the League of Legends character. And so it feels wrong to do that. The king of the Danes, Swain's like, okay, cool. I'm going to leave my son Canute with 500 men. No, with 1,000 men? An amount of men. And they're responsible for keeping an eye on and like containing London and Thorkel's men. And Thorkel goes, why did they leave? There's no more fight. This is boring. Well, if I can use the prince as a hostage, I can make them fight me again. So he abandons the English again. I say again, he abandons an army again, this time abandoning the English, after the English, basically catch word of where Canute is. And he's like, all right, let's do this.
Well, and something I've been kind of unclear on is, like, they always say that he had, like, 500 men. And, like, I'm pretty sure that the majority of these men are Danish. Because they're definitely not the English in the way that they talk about them. So I'm assuming he brought his own army to help out the English, and then he just brings them with him.
Is 500
like
strong.
They're just the people that follow him because he's just absurdly strong.
Yeah,
and they will go wherever he goes.
Yeah, because he's the platonic Viking ideal, dude. So yeah, his war band of 500. I always just take that to mean because there was definitely more English soldiers in London during like the siege. Askeladd catches word of Canute being caught by Thorkel, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I can use this." So he hatches this plan to rescue Canute so that he can start playing the king's game, basically.
And there's a whole moment there where he talks to Thorfinn about Ragnarok and like the end of the world, and that's kind of a weird motivating factor because like that's kind of the conversation that then Askeladd's like, oh yeah, well I guess I just got to do what I can with the life that I've got, and then like basically he's just betting. He's just like, well, I guess this is our opportunity to get up there, like fight that big game for like actual ruling. And he's just like, I've only got one life, so I'm just gonna take this bet, basically.
I'd be lying if I said I remember that conversation about Ragnarok. I remember the conversation of like, hey, if you want power, if you want to be in a position that matters, you got to take risks. I remember that, but I don't remember Ragnarok.
That's the first conversation that happens when they're peeing.
What's upsetting about that is that, by God, do they have conversations while they're peeing?
Like, I'm pretty sure that scene starts with him walking up into the fucking ruins and, like, taking a piss, and then Thorfinn's just there, and he's like, oh, hey, Thorfinn, how's it going?
Oh, Thorfinn, what's up? There's another scene in a couple of episodes where him and Bjorn and someone else are doing some strategy talk all while just letting it fly. We never see their dingle-dangles, thankfully, but we do watch their urine hit the snow and, like, melt into it. It's one of those things. This is a very good adaptation of the source material, but there are times where it's like, all right, that was a manga panel. I don't know why we did that in animation. I don't know why I had to hear the piss. Like, I don't know why I had to hear the like that was weird. Anyway,
it's sound design, bro.
It's sound design, bro. Sound design is at its best when it's not noticed. That means it's doing its job. I definitely noticed the piss. But, it's hard to not when it's literally the only thing on camera. Anyway, long and the short of it is Askeladd hatches a plan after encountering a messenger from one of Canute's retainers, Ragnar, who's basically running hard to try to find another Danish army to come help rescue the prince. But the retreat was sounded, so most of them are gone. Askeladd's crew were up to this time staying around to try to get one more score before the winter. Askeladd murks this guy and his horse, and he's like, okay, cool. Nobody can know about this if the plan that I'm hatching is going to work. So then Askeladd takes his dudes, 1 or 200. I think 100. I think it's like 50 to a long ship, and they have 2 long ships. He takes his 100 men, and he's like, okay, yeah, cool. This is where they're at. Ragnar the Retainer and his men hatch this plan to basically try to intimidate Thorkill. We have 1,000 Danes here to kill you if you don't give us the prince. And unfortunately for him, Thorkill believes him. And he's like, okay, cool, here's the prince. You can't arrest me because I'm not going to go quietly. Bring your 1,000. And the guy goes, oh, God, no. Oh, God, no. And Thorkill's starting to get angry. He's like, there are no 1,000 here. So they start fighting. Askeladd's like, okay, cool. Forest fire in the smoke and confusion. Thorfinn, my expendable. We're going to douse you with water. You're going to run in. You're going to get the prince. You're going to get out. And that more or less is how that goes down. Ragnar yells at Askeladd for the risky plan and for the forest fire getting a bunch of his dudes killed. And Askeladd, at this point, is playing the part of, like, the loyal retainer, like the loyal servant of the crown. He's like, we did what we had to do. Sorry. They don't go by sea immediately because it's like, okay, we're not necessarily close enough, and
now Thorkel is on their tail.
Yeah, now Thorkel's on their tail.
Because Thorkel and Thorfinn do have one moment here. I think they fight briefly. Or maybe they don't actually fight. I think Thorkel sees Thorfinn. He's like
holy shit, Thorfinn!
He's like, yo, dude, you're exactly who I wanted to see. And then he kind of talks about knowing Thor's, and Thorfinn kind of has like a shock moment, like, oh, you know my dad. Yeah. And then Thorkel's like, oh yeah, have the prince. We'll meet up another time because we'll be chasing you.
Yeah, like either fire roars up and stops them and like stops Thorkill from getting to him, or like a big tree falls, or like some like environmental reason where he's like, okay, now I know that you're here. I'll hunt you down. Don't worry. Yeah, so the chase ensues. Askeladd decides that the best way of getting out is by cutting across the mainland and making their way to Wales. We don't know why at this point. They start doing that. But all the while, Thorkill's are on their heels. The snow starts setting in super heavy, so they raid a hamlet, kill everybody there, and decide to spend the winter there. They think that it'll be safe. They think the winter will keep Thorkill away from them. Lamal. It's not how that happens. This is another moment where piss scenes happen, by the way, in this hamlet. Bjorn and Askeladd and I think
is his name. He's the guy who can hear a bunch.
Yeah. They call him Ear. He has big ears. I think he may be an Asian caricature, but I can't tell. Yeah. But since it's anime, I'm willing to assume that it's a racist thing.
But he can just hear things.
He can hear,
he can hear vibrations better, I guess, because he has bigger ears.
Real big ears. It's like, oh, there are 400 men 15 miles to the southeast. Oh, I can't hear that far because the snow's absorbing too much of the sound, and that's why this doesn't work, and we get ambushed.
But then the reason Thorkel finally does learn about them hiding out, there was like one girl that escaped the village before they like killed everyone, and she like let one of the officers know, because she was like found basically half dead in the snow. So then that kind of kicks off a whole nother section of the story, but we haven't even gotten to Wales yet. So
yeah, and so a lot of what happens next can honestly be swapped around up until the next time that like Thorkel actually catches up with them. Thorkill's on their heels. He's closing. They get to the stretch of water that connects them to Wales. Well, The night before, Askeladd sent a messenger to send someone over the river to get in contact with a lord from one of the Wales principalities, and we don't know why at this point, but they come through with boats enough to get Askeladd's men across. And it's pretty much as soon as they touch down that Thorkill shows up and goes, "Hey, how do you? Hang, God damn it!" Um, so they're trudging through Wales, and they meet up with another princedom where Ragnar's super hardcore into talking about, like, you give us 3 longships and all of these other things, and Askeladd's like, we can't expect that from them. They're a poor country. Like, we should be glad that they helped us at all. Blah 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 blah. Askeladd breaks off with the initial like lord that he contacted to handle like negotiations with this other region's lord. And at this point, Askeladd's crew's like, hey, we've been being chased for a while, and there's a bunch of dudes with arrows pointing at us. And Askeladd's told us not to worry about it, but like, this is weird, dude. Normally things don't go this bad for us. Like, the whole winter sucked. Like, what's going on here? And doubt's starting to creep in. In like this little officers meeting where it's just Askeladd and these 2 whalesmen who won't show up again. Askeladd's like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally Welsh. And he's not lying. He's the son of a Welsh woman turned slave turned mother by this like real big and strong Danish person. And this is where we find out that Askeladd harbors a lot of hate and resentment for the Danish. You know, fair enough. Lots of reasons for that to happen for most people in this region of the world at this time. Can't say I blame you, Askeladd. And he's like, yeah, I've got a plan. You get us through. We can, like, this will be worth it for you. So Askeladd's crew gets permission basically to walk through Wales, pretending to be prisoners as they're being escorted through, which makes his crew even more unhappy. Like, we had to surrender our swords. What the hell's going on here? This isn't okay. Yada, yada. It's kind of unimportant in and of itself, except it does introduce Askeladd's, like, Welsh.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of introduces one of his like key motivations, and like one of the things that ultimately, you know, leads to the end of the series. Because like him being Welsh is very central to his identity. So that reveals a lot about his character. And like ultimately I do think that section of the story is a little slow cuz like it is just a lot of them moving along, and like there are some important moments where like Canute speaks to Thorfinn for the first time, and like Thorfinn starts kind of bringing out this side of Canute that like Ragnar hasn't seen before. Just like there's little things here and there that are important in this section of the story, but like ultimately I think it is just meant to introduce some concepts for Askeladd's character that then end up being really important, especially towards the end of this season.
Yeah, in much the same way that the first 5 or so episodes are really just introducing background for and motivation for Thorfinn, these 3-ish episodes are really just getting us more acquainted with Askeladd. Because up until this point, like, he's smart and he's planning something. Like, there's more going on, but like we had no reason to like think that he's anything other than just like a cunning Viking. So this is really where we start figuring out just like more about him. But
And this is also kind of where we learn more about Canute, because up to this point we don't really know much about Canute. Like he's been like, you know, the center of these struggles, but that's just because he's the prince, and we like so far he's just very timid. He can't do anything. He can't like, you know, Askeladd tells him to like state something to the Welsh, and then he's just like too terrified to even attempt to, you know. And this is kind of introducing a lot of like Askeladd's big plays, because this is when Askeladd first reveals that he's going to use Canute. He's going to like grow Canute to become the next king, because like he thinks that since Canute is weak, he'll be able to actually like gain like, favor here, and he'll bring Canute to the throne, and that'll give him a lot more power and stuff. So this definitely introduces a lot of those plot points for Askeladd
Yeah, and it's worth
and
noting,
Canute.
because Canute has a lot of character growth in not a lot of time coming up here, it's worth taking a moment to stop and talk about Canute as a character at this moment. Canute is the sickly, weak second son of the king of the Danes. Very much an indoor boy, was raised by the retainer Ragnar in what, that the culture in the show, because the characters in the show are raised within the culture, to be sure. What the culture and the characters within the show like are just like, yeah, you are coddling this kid, like you are cramping his growth because you're taking it too easy on him. He has long feminine hair, which gets played up a couple of times for laughs, and then once as like an actual plan, but also played for laughs later, and it's just sort of
Wait,
undermines the scene.
what are we talking about?
Um, the fact that since Canute is brought up to be like appear feminine, and
Oh
like people are like,
yeah,
oh, he's a
yeah,
woman,
yeah, yeah.
um, that sort of thing.
Well, there's a lot of parallels between Canute and Thorfinn's upbringing, because like I think Thorfinn, obviously got thrust into the warrior life very early on in his life, but before that, he wasn't strong because Thor's wasn't trying to raise him in that way. He didn't need to be physically strong or capable, and like Canute is an interesting, I wouldn't say foil, but just like an interesting parallel because Canute is also weak because of his upbringing, but that's because Ragnar wanted a son, and Ragnar just wanted to raise Canute to live a peaceful life. But like that's not the reality of being a prince. And so like in a similar fashion, Canute has this very intense growth arc that Thorfinn also has.
I I agree with parts of what you said, but I disagree with others because there's never a part, even with young Thorfinn, wherein we are led to believe that he is weak. He's not aggressive, and he's not the best at playing fake war, but he's not really trying that hard. The moment he starts trying because he learns that Thor's is a mighty warrior, he's kicking all of the kids' ass. He's like beating up 8-year-olds, right? Like, from the get go, Thorfinn, because he's Thor's son, is like, oh, that's a strong kid. He's raised in a harsher environment, maybe, but even then, Ragnar goes like, yeah, it's been a terrible life for Canute because he's a timid, weak kid in a den of vipers. Is like the term he uses, den of vipers. Like, yeah, people are getting murdered. The only real reason that Canute, being the son of the king, has survived, being the weaker son, is that we've specifically made a point of not trying to look like we're a political threat.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I that's definitely all true. I guess I was more so trying to just, you know, discuss that parallel because, like, even though they do both ultimately have like very different upbringings, they both have to grow in their own way. That is like specifically thrust upon them. Like it's not
Okay.
like they it's not like they grow in the way that they do of their own accord. It's because of their experiences and ultimately they do both kind of end up in the same boat or like the same kind of goal, like Thorfinn's goals haven't been fleshed out nearly as much at this point in the story. I do think a lot of this part of the story is used to flesh out Canute's goals because, later on we have this whole moment with Canute, you know, realizing that God isn't actually there for them. And I think this would probably be a good point to like, move on to a little bit more of Canute's or of this part of the arc.
I mean, well, this whole sub conversation started when I was like, let's talk about Canute before we continue
Yeah,
further.
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a
So
good point to because I think we did cover a lot of what makes Canute tick as a character, and there will be
so
more important
you
parts coming up.
mentioned it briefly, but Canute was raised with the type of schooling that's Christian, right? Like part of the time period is that Christianity is big in the new hotness in the region. So Canute is being raised Christian. So at this point, a lot of what his beliefs are is like based upon this very romantic ideal of love, a very compassionate, a very caring form of love. So they go through Wales. Not a lot terribly happens. We some subterfuge, a little bit of introducing some more frustration from the crew, that sort of nonsense. I don't remember how they get caught up with by Thorkel.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm struggling to remember too, because now I can't remember if Wales came before the village that they destroyed or after.
Yeah,
Because for some reason, I feel like the village is what leads into them being chased down by Thorkel, and then like the whole conflict at the bridge, and like like basically some of the final
yeah,
aspects of Canute's storyline.
yeah. I think I conflated it as well. Come at me, internet. Bad comments still fuel the algorithm. Don't come after Forrest. He's a sweet and gentle boy, and it's not his fault. But regardless, I don't think it's a big deal that I mixed them up
Yeah, I don't think
because
so either.
this entire like chunk of episodes is to introduce more slow burn concepts anyway. Long and the short of it, the village happens, Wales happens. The order is not causally related necessarily. Thorkel catches up with Askeladd and the crew at a point in time where Askeladd's crew is like, "Hey, we're done. Like this sucks. We've been hard marching and we've been running and this summer had terrible plunder. Like, what's up, Askeladd? Your luck's out. Our life is worse for following you." So a chunk of his like people are just like, "Okay, cool, deuces." And Askeladd's like, "Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna stop you. If you wanna leave, leave. If you wanna come with me, I'm marching, and we're gonna be marching. You're eating, you're sleeping, and you're shitting while walking, because that's the only way that we can keep ahead of Thorkel." Some people leave, other people stay. They keep going. Later on, they reach this bridge. Askeladd's like, "Okay, cool." Chop down the bridge. And they're like, "Oh, this sucks." And a couple of brothers that aren't really that important. They have a lot of speaking moments. They're really just there to like show you that like, yeah, even though these people are murderers and rapists, they are people. And there's a lot of downtime on the road. And so they're very much like the, yeah, this is your normal guy type of Viking. And yeah, your normal guy type of Viking, they were sexual criminals. They were thieves and murderers, and these guys are no exception. But they're not depicted in like a particularly monstrous light because this is a story about Vikings.
Well, it's interesting how these two characters kind of are like presented as cowards in a way. Like they're like yeah, they're part of this band that is supposed to be like super strong and like they've won like every fight they've gone into, but it's like these two guys like they just are kind of around for the ride. And like yeah, they're not necessarily bad at fighting. They're not like incredible, you know. They're not like the Askeladd and Thorfinn and Thorkel. So
Yeah.
like they're kind of like meant to show us that like oh yeah, like these people, some of these people aren't actually like crazy ass warriors like the rest of the main cast, you know.
Yeah, I think part of it is they're there to show that, like, yeah, Askeladd's band are fair weather friends, and that's sort of not uncommon. Like they're following Askeladd because doing that gets them a bunch of money. They don't have any love lost for Askeladd or anything like that, and so it's like, yeah, cool. Oh wow, it's not cool anymore. Okay, cool, deuces. I'm gonna go try to hook up with Thorkill so that he doesn't murder me. And
Joke's on
so,
you though.
joke's on you though. And so the brothers lead a mutiny of the people who are left. The mutiny gets weird, and basically Askeladd goes, "Okay, Bjorn, I know you're not going to turn on me. Because up until this point, like, yeah, like, we watch the frustrations grow, and Askeladd basically thinks to himself, all right, Bjorn's not going to turn on me. So, like, Bjorn, you take a wagon and the prince and Thorfinn, and if things turn sour, you run and you don't look back. Things turn sour, he runs and he doesn't look back. Some of the other like mutineers on horses chase after them. There's a fun little fight scene. Thorfinn does some cool throwing knife stuff. The wagon flips. Bjorn takes his berserker mushrooms. By the way, it doesn't happen often, but Bjorn's a berserker mushrooms type of guy, which I think is worth stopping.
Is that a Berserk reference?
Eat my ass. It's worth stopping to go. This series was written because the manga author is the equivalent of a Viking weeaboo. So this series is kind of a love letter and a critique to that part of history and that culture, which is why it's very unflinching in its depiction of like their philosophies towards battle and the afterlife and the value of a person. But that's also why, like, yeah, these bad dudes are depicted as being really cool, because there are parts of it, it's like, oh yeah, dude, axe through a skull, that's really cool. But to his credit, the author is like, yeah, and there's a lot of bad, terrible things about this like philosophy and this mindset.
I was gonna say that, like, before we met up today, I was actually reading through some of the manga volumes, and like there's one little blurb in between a couple chapters where the author talks about like just like Vikings doing normal stuff, just like how did Vikings clean their ears, how did Vikings like just do normal human like things that we require for upkeep. And like he said that, like, yeah, it's probably weird that he's like into those weird normal things, but like I feel like that's also part of why
That's why they piss so much.
Yeah, or that's why he has those two brothers who are just kind of normal dudes, because I think he's interested in like the normalcy of like these, because they were people and they do kind of have like this image in our modern culture. So like touching on what they were just as like humans, I think is pretty important.
I'd agree. But yeah, so Bjorn is the concept of berserker mushrooms just because that's cool, and the author thinks that that's cool. And to be fair, that is cool, and he is right to think that that is cool. So he pops a berserk mushroom and just goes in on the dudes who
trying to get the prince back.
Yeah, they're trying to get the prince back. Yeah, and then he's like, "Hey, Thorfinn, get on a horse, go." Or no, I don't remember if he tells Thorfinn to go save Askeladd, or if Thorfinn goes, "I'm not letting them kill Askeladd, I'm killing Askeladd." So if he takes a horse and just runs, I don't remember if Bjorn tells him to run. Okay, so
yeah, Bjorn doesn't tell him. Thorfinn, like the second they crash, Thorfinn is just like, oh my god, Askeladd might be in danger. I gotta go back there. Because, like, Thorfinn doesn't like Askeladd, but he's still so obsessed with the concept of killing him himself that, like, if Askeladd is in a tight situation, he's like, no, this can't be happening. I can't let Askeladd die without me killing him. It's like that.
If I'm not
that
killing
obsession.
him in a duel, then something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Thorfinn runs off to go help Askeladd, who, by the way, at this time is just going in on the dudes around him. He's like, okay, well, since this is happening, I should let you guys know. We've eaten together, we've fought together, we've laughed together. I hate all of you Danes, you filthy pigmen. Come at me.
And then he's also like, man, I've gotten old. I remember when 50 men would have been a cakewalk.
Yeah, and he's working his way through them, like he's getting them. He's winning. Like,
it's honestly, I wish we could have seen Askeladd versus Thorkel, dude.
I wanted more Askeladd fighting in general, because Askeladd's very interesting because he is a single-handed sword fighter, which historically had a lot of real usage. But when everyone around you is either using what they have on hand or sword and board, like sword and shield, like being a single sword fighter is like it's a standout. It is like a special way of fighting that did require a lot more like tugging on things, like subterfuge type things, and it really does fit his like caricature of being like more cunning and conniving. But God, I wish we saw more of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wish
He
Thorkel had fought
cleaves a
him, dude.
head through the helmet, and everyone around is like, "Oh my God, I knew Askeladd was strong, but God dang,
Like
what's
he
he
just
doing?"
does it, and they're like, "Oh my god, through the helmet!" And then he's
And
like,
it's like, "Oh, sorry guys, I guess I got a little angry there." Anyway, come on, keep going. We're not done.
"Yeah."
So that fight happens for a while.
And then Thorfinn and Thorkel show up at the same time.
Yeah,
Well, Thorkel shows up a little bit
yeah.
before that, and he's like, "Oh my god, they're fighting without me! I gotta get in there and start fighting!"
I think he literally shouts, "Wait for me!"
Yeah, he
as
just
he's
goes
running
running
at
down the
him with
hill,
his
just like,
double axes. Yeah, and so the actual sequence of events escape me. Askeladd gets Dundid shot with arrows. He catches an arrow in the leg because he's too slow to get behind a fallen shield. What's left of Askeladd's men are like, "Oh, hey, Thorkel, we don't want no trouble with you. Here, let us join you. We got you, Askeladd. My brother's grabbing the prince right now. We'll give him to you in exchange for our lives." And he's like, "Nah, dude, that's not how this works.
I'm
We're
not here.
warriors.
I'm not here for the prince, bro. I'm here for the fight."
I'm here for the fight. You guys are my enemies, and if you're gonna turn your back on Askeladd and try to like because you're trying to run away from a fight, I don't want you in my life. So pick up your weapons so that you can go to Valhalla, and we're gonna throw down." So they pick up their weapons so that they can go to Valhalla, and they throw down. And because not only Thorkel is super strong, but Thorkel's band of 500 are just like really good at what they do, they make kind of short work of them canonically. There's a wonderful moment where one of the two brothers that we were talking about earlier, the guy who's like sort of orchestrating this like mutiny, he's like while everyone else is fighting, he's like, "Hey, Thorkel, like, come on, guy, we don't got to do this. Like we're doing this for you. Don't worry, we got you the prince. Like we're on it." And Thorkel's like, "Hey, dude, pick up your axe, man. You can't go to Valhalla if you don't have an axe, like a weapon in your hand. Pick it up." And then he finally goes like, "I guess." And then Thorkel just like gives him like this like intimidating.
Like he's just
He's just
becoming
like,
menacing. He's like,
"Now
"Okay,
swing.
yeah, now we're gonna fight."
Take a swing at me
And then
so that you die fighting."
this guy just cracks. He's just like he's brain dead now,
Yeah,
basically.
he goes catatonic.
He's just like, yeah, Thorkel is just too intimidating.
And then Thorkel just like starts poking him with like the shaft of his axe, and he goes, "Oh, I pushed him too hard." Well,
Like, I love to imagine that he's done that to multiple people.
he definitely got a grasp of the situation very quickly.
Yeah,
So
he was.
he almost certainly has.
He's like, oh, god damn it, not again.
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, I'm not going to kill you because you're not a warrior anymore. So, all right, hey, second in command, how's the rest of this going?" It's like, "Oh yeah, we got Askeladd. The rest of them are dead." And I'm like, "Okay, cool."
And then
And this is when Thorfinn catches up with them.
This is such a great moment because like Thorkel's just standing there talking to Askeladd, and then Thorfinn just like comes screaming in, and he's like, "Don't you dare kill him!" And Thorkel's like, "Oh wait, I thought he was your
My
leader."
boy!
He's like, "I thought he was your leader," and Thorfinn's like, "No, he's my mark. I'm gonna kill him." And then Thorkel's like, "Oh okay, then I'll just keep over here. Then you can fight me to get to him."
Duel me for him. You come at me, and if you kill me, you then get the honor of killing him. And so they do.
That fight's so good, dude. That's
Um,
another really good fight.
Yeah, and
I don't think
it's a very good fight.
I don't think it's nearly as good as say like the initial Thorfinn and Thorkel fight, or even like Askeladd's fight just before this, because like it is a lot of Thorfinn just like jumping around. It's kind of just like the same.
I think it's visually more interesting.
Oh yeah,
But I definitely think that like the significance of it is lessened. Before they do that, Bjorn has worked his way through the dudes that chased after him and the prince. There's also a comedy drunken monk character who's just done with the world, and he too is obsessed with what love is. And he has sort of rejected the idea that love is that I will do anything for you to the point of sacrificing others. By this point, it's worth noting that Askeladd has arranged for the death of Ragnar. Ragnar is dead at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna actually get to that. I was like, we completely forgot to mention that Ragnar got killed right, like, kind of before this conflict started happening.
Yeah, there's an attack by the English back in the village, or yeah, there's an attack by the English back in the Snowden village, and Askeladd's like, okay, cool, we leave as soon as this battle's done because that means they found us, which means Thorkill knows that we're here. Hey, we're gonna do that, and Ragnar's like, no, this is a terrible idea. Bring me Askeladd, and his messenger goes like, he's on the battlefield. You're gonna have to go find him. Ragnar just like harumphs his way, and he goes, hang on, the battle's that way. And then the messenger goes, oh my god, finally, you idiot. And then some dude pops out and stabs him. And then he goes, bring me Askeladd. I have to tell him something before I die. Askeladd pops out from behind the tree and is like, oh, what's up? And basically it was like, hey, I don't care that you killed me. You're an asshole, but I don't care that you killed me. Take care of the prince. And Askeladd's like, yeah, will do. For the record, no hard feelings. I did this because the prince cannot grow strong while you're alive because you've been coddling him.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting moment, and Ragnar isn't necessarily the best character. Like, he's kind of just, he's not a bad character. He definitely gives you a good insight into, like, what it means to be like the handler of a prince, and like, he's not inherently bad. He has to go along with a lot of things, but like, and even his death moments I thought were really good because
his death moments are his coolest moments.
Yeah, because he's accepted his fate. He's not like freaking out. He gets stabbed and he's like, oh god damn it. And then he's like, I just need to talk to Askeladd. Just bring Askeladd. He's not like, oh my god, what did you do to me?
Well, it's super interesting because in his death, I think the reason why he's so unflinchingly accepting of it is he, like, when he was tasked with bringing up Canute, it sort of feels like he's like, okay, cool, my life isn't for me anymore. My life is for him. And so he's like, I'm dying. I don't care about that because I need to make sure that the prince is okay. Because I've always been comfortable with dying for his sake. And so it's like, hey, Askeladd, you swear to me that you take care of the prince. And Askeladd's like, yeah, I, Askeladd, son of Olaf, I'll do the thing. Anyway, I bring that up because the drunken monk and Prince Canute, while Bjorn is just going in psycho mode on these dudes, are having just like a conversation about love. They're like, what is love? And it's like, oh, yeah, I mean, yeah. And
well, I mean, this is
at this
also
point, Canute knows that Ragnar's dead. And the prince goes, I don't know, do you think what Ragnar felt for you is love? In sort of like a testing way. And it's like, no, it's not love, because if he loved you, he wouldn't have let an entire village have been murdered for your sake. He cared for you, but the extent to which he sacrificed others for you means that it could not have been love. Like, it's a meditation on what that love means. And then, the prince just sort of asks, well, then is there love on earth? And the monk points to one of the guys that Bjorn murdered, and he's like, that dude, right now and moving forward, is the greatest example of love. Because he will give of his body for the insects and the animals. He will give of his bones for the field. And he will never again cause harm to another person.
Yeah, or hate anyone, I mean, it's definitely a good moment. And I mean, this is legitimately like the turning point for Canute's character, because like the Ragnar thing happens, and like you can tell that this change is building. And I think that the execution of this moment is really good for Canute's character, because it doesn't feel forced to me. It really, like, this is when Canute basically like gets his like dream. This
is his poop in a group.
This is when he like decides what he wants to achieve, you know, because like after having this discussion about love, he realizes like, oh, so the world that God created is just devoid of love. Like, why the hell did he create it then? And then he's like, well, okay, then I don't care about God anymore. I'm going to create my own paradise.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
sort
this
of a
is,
spiteful moment too, because he's like, if God created this world with all of these trials and tribulations, then he cannot love us in the Christian ideal of love because he is causing people to suffer in the name of testing us, which cannot be love. So, fuck him. I'm going to make Earth as close to a paradise so that he knows that we do not need his trials and tribulations.
yeah, I think that's, I mean, I feel like it's a good moment because it does ultimately, you know, later down the line, without spoiling anything, it does ultimately lead to some like very important aspects of Canute and Thorfinn's characters. Because this is all just building blocks. Like this is basically the prologue for the rest of the series, where we get to learn more about Thorfinn. But Canute kind of takes central stage here because I do think the author wanted to build Canute's character to get to a similar point where Thorfinn will be later. Because like Thorfinn doesn't really have much character development yet. All of Thorfinn's character development comes after this, you know.
It literally all happens in the arc that season 2 is going to start with.
Which I'm super stoked for. But yeah, so this happens. Canute basically is like, well, this is stupid. Why are these people fighting? And he just like stands up to Bjorn, and like Bjorn, who's on the berserker mushroom, just kind of like doesn't know what to do because Canute's just kind of showing him kindness, you know, like he was just fighting the people that were aggressive, you know.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a kindness thing or if he's just like not
He's not
like
phased.
like he isn't phased, he isn't scared, he isn't angry, and so like the like measured response just sort of confuses the roided out Bjorn for long enough that mustached brother from the pair of brothers who orchestrated the mutiny stabs Bjorn in the back with a spear. Yeah. And then Canute's like, stop it, you dumbass. Stop it. Get a horse. Get him on a sled. We're going back to Thorkel and Askeladd. Back at Thorkel and Askeladd, Thorfinn and Thorkel are doing a duel for Askeladd. And Thorfinn's doing pretty well. He's learned from the last duel what he needs to do, what he needs to avoid, what didn't work. And they're starting to do well. At this point, it had been established that Thorkel knew Thor's. And so Thorfinn was like, hey, what do you know about my dad? Or no, I don't even think he asked. I think Thorkel goes, hey, if you entertain me along the way, like, you know, again, if you kill me, you can have Askeladd, I don't care. But if you entertain me along the way, I'll talk to you about your dad. And so they basically fight their way to an intermission point. Where
Thorfinn goes flying.
Yeah, Thorkel just gives him the big boot.
He just like goes
the
to
size
kick him.
14, well, it's the big show. The big boot just knocks him down. And by knocks him down, I mean punts him into the sky in one of like two
Thorfinn,
examples of like anime like nonsense.
Yeah, just like absurd strength levels. But like Thorfinn like jumps as he punches him or kicks him. So like Thorfinn just goes extra high.
Yeah. He falls through the branches of a tree, and in I think my favorite moment, like my favorite comedy moment in the entire season, Askeladd goes, all right, well, there goes my chance of living. Thorkel et al. Goes over to where Thorfinn landed and like, oh, okay, does this mean this is over? And Thorfinn like kind of like regains consciousness a bit and goes, hey, what are you doing? Are you making fun of me? And then he like raises his arm to go back to fighting, and it's broken at the elbow. It is soft dangling down. It is droopy and it is gross. And then he screams in pain. And Thorkel goes, okay, go ahead and set that because this isn't going to be fun while you're like that. And so Askeladd like hobbles over to Thorfinn, and he's like, all right, for once in your life, just let me help you. So he sets the arm in like a brace. They like swaddle the knife in it. And Thorkel just gives him a history lesson. We learn that Thorkel is the brother of the dad.
No, he's the brother of the leader of the Yom
Young Vikings,
Vikings,
which is
which he's the
which is the father-in-law of Thor's. So, and therefore
he's the brother
he's
to Thorfinn's mom. He's basically
he's the uncle to Thorfinn's mom.
no, he is Thorfinn's uncle.
He is the okay.
Yeah, because
Okay,
they
I
were
couldn't
both.
remember if he was uncle or great uncle.
Or wait, oh wait, no, I think he
Because
is great uncle because he's the
he is the
brother of
leader of,
Sigvaldi,
yes,
and then
he is the
Helga.
leader
Yeah.
of the Yoms Vikings brother, which makes him Helga, Thorfinn's mom's uncle. So he's Thorfinn's great uncle. And they're just
We
like,
got
oh,
there.
yeah, we got there. And so he's like, oh, all right. Yeah, so we learn that, and then we learn just a little bit more about Thor's and what happened after he faked his death. He came back for Helga, and we learn about like how he escaped. Thorkill's like depressed drinking in a flashback, and he's like depressed, passed out on the roof of Thor's old hut. And Thor's and Helga are sneaking out, and he's like, "Hey, you're robbing the house of someone I cared deeply for, so I'ma kill you to try to make me feel better." And then Thor's just does his Thor's thing and just like with his bare hand breaks the axe that he's swinging at him. And he goes, "Oh my God, Thor's, dude, why are you dressed like that? Come on, let's have a drink. You're back, dude. We had a funeral. What's up, dude?" And Thor's like, "Hey, dude, I'm leaving. Like, I got something that I need to protect." He doesn't say it as much, but we as the audience at this point know that that's what he's there for. And
I loved that there was a moment when like they were having Thor's funeral, and Thorkel was just like, "Man, I wished I was the one that could kill him." He was like, "I wanted to fight him."
yeah, and like again, it isn't in like a murder like
Yeah.
way. It's just like, man, that dude was so strong.
He was like, he was the only person stronger than me. Why did I get to fight him again?
Yeah.
No.
And so Thor's like, "No, man, I gotta go. Like, I know what it means to be a true warrior now. Like, I have to go." And Thorkel's like, "Fine. Out of respect for you, fine." And that's how
Well,
he
no,
goes.
he doesn't say fine. He straight up goes to kill Thorkel or Thor's.
I don't.
Yeah, no,
Does
because
he?
he's like, I'm gonna leave, and Thorkel's like, I mean, you know what they do to deserters, and like he actually goes to swing at Thor's, and Thor that's when Thor's breaks it,
That
and
happens
then
before
Thor's
the
just
hood.
knocks him out. Like so initially, like he goes to swing, Thorkel, well, Thor's blocks the axe without breaking it, and that's when his hood flies off. And then they have a little conversation, and then Thorkel is like, "Well, if you're gonna leave, then I just like have to fight you." And then that's when Thor's like breaks the axe for real, and then just straight up one punch knocks out Thorkel, and then they're gone. And that's what Thorkel says was the last time he saw Thor's.
That's that might be true. That's not how I remember it.
Okay, I mean
But
I
fun
did just
fact,
watch it, but
it doesn't matter
no, I know. I
because it
mean,
is a flashback.
but
For
I
those of you
thought
at
it was a
home,
really cool moment, so I remembered it. But I mean,
I'm gonna give you big shruggies.
I think this is a
Um,
good point to like go to Canute showing up after this.
so before that, um, so what Canute shows up to is Askeladd basically goes, "Hey, dude, do you know why I keep kicking your ass? Do you know why you're losing? Is you get hot headed when we talk about your dad. Stop that. Um, do you want to know what Thorko's one weakness is? He has weak eyes, so create a moment. I'm going to shine light off of my sword into him, and then when he winces, go crazy." He goes crazy, gouges out an eye, and this is about when Canute shows up, and he goes, "Stop it!
Well, I
Get
actually think
help!"
that so Thorfinn gets one like really good punch in after Askeladd like blinds Thorkel, and Thorkel like he just like Thorfinn punches him in the chin, just like a straight knockout punch, just to like rattle his brain, and then Thorkel like falls down, and then that's when Thorfinn like leaps on him and like plunges out his eyeball, and then Canute shows up. Sorry, I keep doing
I,
this.
I'm just hitting you with the shrug.
I just like these fight
I mean,
moments.
in that instance in particular, what I said isn't wrong. I just didn't
No,
bring up the
exactly.
punch. Just like
Yeah, no.
he's gouging out an eyeball, and that's when Canute
It was
shows
the
up.
same purpose. But yeah, Canute shows up, and then that's when things really just kind of. I mean, this is when we learn that Canute has changed significantly because like everyone's like, wait, is this the same guy? And Thorkel eventually like, well, Canute is basically like, why are we doing this? Why are we fighting? I'm gonna go take over the throne, and anyone who wants to follow me can follow me. And Thorkel's like, dude, I know you were weak. If you can like if you've changed so much, like I've seen people exactly do like try to do exactly what you're doing, but the second anything serious starts to happen, they just like cry. And then he just like goes to punch Canute in the face, and Canute just stands there, just like stonewall, just like no, that doesn't phase me. And then Thorkel joins him, and that kind of like is the impetus because like Askeladd also joins him. Like they're all like, dude, this is crazy. Like what happened? But this is also what Askeladd was banking on, like Ragnar's death, and just Canute, kind of getting a wake up call, just kind of like changed him as a person, which is one of my favorite aspects of Canute's character. And then they go back to Gainsborough after this. Like this kind of whole situation gets wrapped up, and then Canute's like, okay, we're gonna go to Gainsborough where my dad is, and we're gonna, just work on taking the throne from him. And that kind of leads into like the last like 4 episodes, I'd say, because like basically it starts with them showing up in Gainsborough, and then they have one significant audience with the king, and that kind of like that's when the king shows his first intention that like yeah he was gonna just kill Canute, but Askeladd kind of jumps in, and Askeladd uses his ability to basically just talk himself out of a situation and like convinces the king to like that killing Canute here wouldn't be beneficial in like any way. um and then yeah, even like Askeladd starts just trying to scheme because he thinks he's got the king figured out, but he also knows that the king is really smart, and capable of like, playing the same game that Askeladd's trying to play. And to the point where Askeladd even decides to hire an assassin to kill the prince, which ends up being a body double.
Which is the only other time that the fact that the prince is called a woman because of his hair and all of that comes into play. Is the body double's a woman, and he asked them why they chose a woman, and they just go, the only one that looked like you. And then the prince goes, okay, you're never using a body double again.
This kind of leads to rumors. Like people are like, "Oh my God, King Swain's trying to kill Canute," and that's like specifically what Askeladd was trying to achieve. Um, this also leads to some good character moments with Thorfinn because like Thorfinn and Askeladd have their final duel. Bjorn, who actually is like bedridden essentially due to that stab wound because it like reached too far in. He's like basically on death's bed, so he wants Askeladd to just fight him one more time and kill him. That's a really good moment. It just wraps up Bjorn's character really well because you never really learn a whole lot about who Bjorn is. Like that's not really the point of his character, but this moment kind of affirms what he wanted from Askeladd. He followed Askeladd pretty blindly, and he just wanted to be Askeladd's friend, but like he was just under the assumption like, oh yeah, Askeladd probably just hates me because he hates all Danes.
Yeah, so Bjorn was there when Askeladd was doing that. I've always hated you, filthy pigmen Danes. And so, okay, so he's bedridden. Basically, asks Askeladd to be the one to kill him. They have this duel moment. Askeladd just barely misses vitals, and he goes, "Oh, dude, I am so sorry. Here, I'll kill you real fast. This must be very painful for you." And he just goes, "I just wanted to be your friend." Um, and there's a moment where we don't know. We legitimately don't. And I like this. In both the manga and the anime, it's not confirmed, but Askeladd then goes, "Yeah, Bjorn, you were my friend." And then Bjorn just goes like, "All right, send me off." We don't know whether or not Askeladd is lying for the sake of being kind to a dying man because he's not that much of an asshole, or if he legitimately did consider Bjorn a friend, looking back on it. We don't know. I'm leaning towards the I'm not going to send this dude to the afterlife knowing that I hated him. I'm a bad dude, but I'm not a bad dude,
Yeah, I
you
mean, I
know?
feel like Bjorn showed enough to Askeladd. I mean, personally, I feel like it's pretty believable that Askeladd did genuinely care for him, but not like absurd, but like, I mean, Askeladd is shown to be human. He's like he does a lot of like things and he says a lot of things, but it's I mean like it would be hard for me to see that that would be a lie. I don't know.
I mean, you see, my thing is it would be hard for me to see that it's the truth, right? Because Bjorn is a Dane who is doing all of the savage murdering and pillaging that Askeladd hates of the Danish. The only difference is that Bjorn was loyal to him, right? And like we get enough of why Askeladd hates Danish warriors and all warriors because of like their blind desire to do all of this, and Bjorn's no exception, and Askeladd knows that about Bjorn. So I legitimately don't think he had a fondness for Bjorn. I mean, I think it's like a little bit like, yeah, I have literally spent like the last 15 years of my life with this dude. So that sucks. But I honestly think it's a moment of Askeladd going, I can give this to you. I can let you hear what you want to hear right before I kill you. Like, if this is the only thing that you wanted, Christian judgment, Valhalla, Ragnarok, whatever comes next, I can at least send you off with that comfort, whether or not it's a lie.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean I didn't really think about it in that way, but that's cool.
I actually like it. I actually like the moment better that way
Yeah.
because it shows like a more human side of Askeladd than just going like, "Oh, I did have a friend," which feels like a lot more anime-y than just going like, "All right, dude, I'll let you have it,"
Oh,
which
okay.
feels a lot more like the
I
like
guess, yeah. I guess I have trouble like disconnecting the two. Like even if it wasn't 100% truthful, it's hard for me to see that there is zero truth to it. Like that Askeladd just 100% didn't view Bjorn as a friend in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, I think he makes it pretty apparent that he doesn't view any Danish as people whom he likes.
Yeah, I know.
Like
Yeah, I know.
he goes as much as to say that.
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
just interesting to talk about.
the series or the season wraps up like Forrest was saying in Gainsborough. Political machinations happen. The long and the short of it is Floki, who is the Yomes Viking dude who hired Askeladd in the first place, whispers to the king, "Hey, we don't know why, but when you mentioned Wales, Askeladd like had a tell. We don't know why, but if you're trying to get him away from Canute because you still want to kill Canute, go after him and Wales." And so he does. So he's like, "Hey, Askeladd, here's your reward for saving the prince." Blah 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 blah. And Askeladd, because the next conquest is going to be Wales, takes this moment to go, "Hey, Your Highness, with all due respect, I don't think this is worth it. I don't think this is worth the time." And then the king basically, so that he can save face, goes, "Oh, you see, this is what I need. I need people who respect me enough to disagree with me." And then he walks up and like pretends to like be giving him a hug and just goes like, "All right, dude, you either save Wales or you save Canute. That's your choice. Pick one." Then Askeladd in that moment goes, "Well, there's one way to do both."
This
So
is the best moment.
he takes his sword. First he goes, you know, you're real fucking ugly for a king. Not exactly that, but he basically goes that, and then he goes, what? And everyone goes, did he say what I think he said? And he goes, yeah, that you don't deserve to wear that crown. It does not deserve to be on such an ugly face. And so he holds the king at like sword point, and the king goes, hey, dude, if you stop this right now, I'll forgive you this transgression. And like all of the guards are like starting to close in, and Ascad's like, hey, dude, I can kill him faster than you guys can get to me, so you guys better back up. And Ascalon basically like doubles down into like this like I am a crazy person way, because he's trying to distance his actions from Canute. And to be fair, him, Canute, and Thorkel were planning on killing Swain once upon like
At some point.
at some point when they had more political following, more allies, when it wouldn't be quite as obvious that it was them. And so Ascalon's like, okay, cool. I need to act crazy so that people don't hold Canute to this. But I also need to kill Swain so that nobody goes after Wales. This is where we learn that Askeladd's real name, the name given to him by his slave mother, is Lucius Artorius Castus, a long descendant, allegedly, of...
Basically Artorias, or who would become the King Arthur legend.
Yeah.
And that's like
I
a
kept
huge
wanting to say the Roman, but it's not the Roman.
that's definitely like an aspect of Askeladd's character. But like I was also gonna touch on how I think this whole moment brings his involvement with Wales like full circle, because there's this really interesting moment where it's just we're in Askeladd's head and he's just thinking about all of his options. He's like, what can I even do in this situation? He's like, Wales is my home country, I'm not just gonna let them die. And he's like overthinking it. He's just like, did he get me? Did he like figure it out? Am I just like screwed? And I think that was a good way of like, giving Askeladd that push as a character to just do the insane. Yeah. And like when I first saw him cut the king's head off, I was like, what? My jaw dropped, like legitimately. Like it's such a good moment, because like I also love that like he's just holding him at sword point, and then like Floki tries to throw like a mug at him, and he just kind of knocks it away and then just immediately decapitates the king, like with zero hesitation. And it's just like such a crazy scene.
Yeah.
It just like blew me back.
Askeladd in this moment, and in fact most characters who die, most important characters who die, are all sort of, in one way or another, people who have ideals that are bigger than them. Like they're not afraid of death. They're not running from anything, so they don't want to die, but they're like, okay, cool, things more important than me are at stake here. And so, yeah, the king presents him with this Canute or Wales, and he's like, well, I can do both if Canute realizes what I'm doing and follows along. Thorkel gets it too, which is very cool. Thorkel at first like, hey, Swain was mine. I told you he was mine. That's mine. Stop it. And then Canute goes, hey, he's doing a thing. Let him go. I'll let you kill him at the end of it. And then Thorkel goes, no, I don't want it. I don't want to kill him. You do it. A mad dog should be killed by his master.
Yeah, I love that. That whole scene is so good. Because like Thorkel is not unintelligent. Like, no. He is,
he's just a murder boy.
He is just a fighter. But like, and a lot of his scenes, are kind of taken over by him just like, oh yeah, I just want to fight. Like, that's the only thing that matters. But like, he does have a level head, because he doesn't just like he'll run into a fight and he wants to instigate a fight, but he's not just going to do it at literally any point.
Yeah. He doesn't want to die. I mean, he wants to die in battle, but he's not looking like he isn't suicidal. Yeah. Right? Like, he isn't like trying to end things. He's just like, yeah, I want my death to be on the battlefield, but until then, life is the battlefield. Yeah. Love is a battlefield. Oh, Pat Benatar. Yeah, and so Askeladd just sort of goes off, has a little bit of a moment here, just
And he's
killing
just like
guards.
he's like having zero problem. Like they're just like not even touching
Yeah,
him.
they're just dropping like flies. And then up through this point, Thorfinn just hasn't been here because he doesn't care about any of this. He cares about killing Askeladd. And at this point, Leif Erikson has found him after looking around for him for all of these years. And he's like, hey, let's go home. Come on, please. But while they're at the docks, they find, or he hears the commotion in the feasting hall, and he sees that Askeladd's attacking people, and he's like, no, 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 no. And so he rushes in. But while this is happening,
Floki is on his knees because like he's like kind of the last person that goes at Askeladd.
yeah,
And like
yeah, and Askeladd gets him into like this like blocking thing, and Floki's like, hey dude, you're insane, why did you do this to the king? And Askeladd's like, I am the king's alive and well.
yeah,
On your knees, and like forces him down.
I mean,
in
and like that
a
just
guard,
shows
and
how
it's such a cool scene.
yeah, that just shows how like just absurdly strong Askeladd is too, because like Floki's just like fucking cowering, and then
Thorfinn basically was like, hey, what's going on?
well, he's like trying to make his way
Yeah,
in.
well, he shouts for Askeladd, and then Askeladd turns on him and goes, stay away. Which, like, is kind of a cool moment for us as people to realize that, like, us as viewers to realize that, like, yeah, no, he's not really crazy. They're right. This is an act. He knows that he can't get Thorfinn involved in this because then it ruins further credibility. And if he and Thorfinn go down, then there's just less people to protect Canute for Canute to be successful. So he's like, stay away. And in that moment, Canute stabs him with a sword. And he's just like, oh, this is your first time stabbing somebody, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well done. Coughs up a bunch of blood. The prince starts getting, like, dizzy. And this is, like, Thorkel's coolest moment. Because he walks up behind the prince as he starts to stagger. And he just goes, you gotta stand tall. Like, this is the moment that matters. If you show weakness here, everything he just did is pointless.
Yeah, that's
And
a
so
really
he
good
like
moment.
supports the prince in like standing up in like this grand moment. And then basically we get Thorfinn going, don't you die, stand up right now and duel me. Come on, nope, 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 nope.
Oh, that's just a very emotional scene for Thorfinn, obviously, because this is literally taking the only thing that has basically given him a driving force in his life.
To the extent that Askeladd goes, hey dude, if you want to kill me, you're running out of time. Like, go ahead and stab me. And then Thorfinn's like yelling, like, stand up, duel me. And Askeladd goes, so what are you gonna do once I'm dead? Like,
Yeah,
have you thought about what you're gonna live for?
He's like, what are you going to do with your life? And like, this is definitely, I, thinking forward in the manga, I don't remember if this quote comes up again particularly, but like, this is kind of an important moment because Thorfinn's never thought about that. Thorfinn doesn't have he really doesn't have a purpose in life other than fighting Askeladd, because that's all he's built his life around at this point, and it's the thing that keeps him from going back to his hometown with the Leaf, and it's like, it's a very good moment, and he just freaks out.
Yeah. And then Canute goes and says something to him. It's ultimately unimportant, but Thorfinn, in his rage and confusion, lashes out and tries to kill Canute. He gets him across the face. Floki tries to go, like, Floki's like, okay, cool, execute him, and like Canute, without missing a beat, goes, stop it, leave him alive. And then Floki's like trying to do like some political stuff, like, hey, go be taken care of in the private chambers. And then Canute goes, hey, with Swain dead, do you know who leads the army in London? And then he goes and picks up the crown off the ground, puts it on his head, and starts making commands.
It's a good moment.
Canute seizes the throne to make his better world. We get a very cool scene as Thorfinn's being tackled by all these guards of his knife.
They're like,
in the garbage.
They're like pulling him away, and like they're just trying to like throw him in jail basically, and then he's like reaching out, he like just kind of drops his father's knife.
And in the reflection of the knife, we see like a bunch of moments that have brought us here, a bunch of character motivation, background scenes, and it's a very cool visual image that is
Yeah,
not
it's
in the manga because you can't do that in the manga, but is super cool. And then the actual like final outro, I think, is a bit of a letdown because it's very much a stay tuned for season two sort of
yeah, but I
outro,
mean like
where we get a
also
bunch of cuts to characters that we don't know yet. We get a bunch of like random things, and for as much as it's does very much set you up for being ready for season two, I don't like that because now I know what to be looking for season two. Like as a viewer, it's like, oh, now I know that I'm going to have to pay attention to this, this, and this. Um, but also, I don't like that because it makes the moments in the now feel less important, and that's kind of the point of it, right? Like this episode is literally titled "End of Prologue." Right? Like all of this, all of the first season is to get you to the point where Thorfinn is at the start of the next arc.
yeah.
But within the context of season one, it feels weird. I don't like it personally.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessary by any means. It did feel like a weird little thing, but I also think it was specifically just kind of meant to be for the manga readers. It was just like, look, you can get a little glimpse at these characters. Like I don't really have strong feelings about it, I guess. Yeah, dude, such a wild ride that first season.
It's good. I think in general, it's a powerful adaptation. Most of it is pretty one for one for the manga, so if you don't want to bother reading it, you can get away with just watching it. I think the manga is better paced in general a little bit. I think that some of the fights are a little bit weightier, and I think some of the dialogue scenes just sort of clip by faster. Um,
Because I was gonna say that like watching it again, I guess I might have touched on this in my initial statement, but like watching it again, I definitely realized I don't like it nearly as much on a second watch. Um, just because, a lot of the scenes do kind of lose their weight. I mean, they're still really good, but like just knowing what happens, it was definitely a little bit harder for me to like just get through. Because like the first time I was watching it, I was intrigued the whole time for sure. So for anyone who's gonna watch it, just yeah, I definitely suggest it. Um,
yeah.
and we never touched on like the origin of Thorfinn. Like I learned that Thorfinn is a real person. I mean, I've done this for a while because like this whole story is based on Thorfinn Karlsefni, which is a name that gets name dropped briefly during the end. I think it's just a nickname that Thorfinn got. I'm not quite sure how, but there is an actual story called the Vinland Saga that I think was written like hundreds of years ago. That details Thorfinn's journeys to Vinland because he was like the second real Viking to make it and land in North America. Leif was like the first. Leif Erikson was the first. Um, and yeah, like even King Sweyn was a real person. Canute was a real person. That whole like line of Danish kings were all based on real people. They briefly mention um, Canute's grandfather, the king before Sweyn, and he was
And how he got his ass kicked by the fucking Irish.
and he was actually like the first king to like accept Christianity into that area, which I thought was interesting. I don't think Askeladd and Thorkel are based on real people. I wish they were, but
I would love Askeladd to be based on a real person, if only because that would give me great hope for just a big sect of Arturius fight boys out there. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I do think the manga in general is a better experience, but I do think watching it is great and awesome. And if you're only going to do one, honestly, watching it's just easier.
I just can't wait for the rest of the story because watching this again made me realize like, oh yeah, I actually just like the rest of this series more than the beginning of this series.
Season 2 is definitely going to be interesting. I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm probably not going to watch season 2 unless this
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
project kicks off and like we get like Patreon money goals, whatever, right? Unless something like that happens, I don't think I'm going to watch it because I think I'm just content reading it, especially because moving forward, spoiler alerts for season 2, the show gets less combat reliant because the entire point is what makes a true warrior, what makes a person's life worth living, right? Because the whole discussion about warriors and living a warrior's life is because within the culture, you like the ideal life is that of a warrior. Well, then you have to question what's a true warrior. And well, being a true warrior, they don't say it, but it's heavily implied that the answer to that question is having something worth fighting for. Not fighting against something, not fighting against enemies, not fighting to kill people, but having something to protect, right? Like that's when Thor's left the Jomsvikings, he has a daughter to protect. That's when Canute gets those same mysterious true warrior eyes. It's because he has something to fight for, and it's building that perfect world, right? Like having a goal worth shedding blood for and worth like going to violence for is ultimately what it feels like the point of at least season 1 is.
yeah, definitely. It sets up all of the things that push the series ahead in the future.
But as a result, season 2 and moving on, because we've had those things, they get less violent. There's still fights going on because it's still the time period and it's still the culture, but it's a lot more dialogue based.
Yeah, I mean, this next arc is definitely a lot more dialogue based, but then going forward, there is a bit more fighting, which I like. I'm just going to watch the second season because I just want to re experience it. And I know I could always just reread it, but anime is always a different experience. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening.
Don't say that yet.
Why not?
Because, Forrest, I don't use social media, but you have things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I make music, and you have probably heard it as the intro for this podcast. You can find my music under Bustello at Bandcamp and Spotify.
Bustello.
Yeah, and then I have a more upbeat dance project called Prism Ship, PRISMSHIP. And yeah, I've got a pretty dope Bloodborne concept album under that project. Yeah, that's where you can find me on YouTube too, because I post to YouTube almost weekly. So
now thank them for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.